But before I introduce him, a couple of notices. Oh, goodness me, I can't even get my words out of my mouth. Not a good start. We're going to open up our Zoom watch room at about 6 o'clock. Hopefully some of you can join us for a beer, a chat, and a chance to win a great opening day care package from MLB Europe. And don't forget, the MLB UK community are hosting their first in-play runs of the season at 6 p.m. too. Why not watch Dave Shaw and the crew on YouTube while settling in to a chat with us? It's on youtube.com/in-play runs. Right, down to business. Can we see all of these guys on the screen, or can we just see me and Josh? I don't know. Right, anyway, I'm delighted to be joined by a man who has over 20 years experience behind the mic for a whole bunch of MLB teams, including the Red Sox, the Mets, and the Texas Rangers. Welcome, Josh Lewin. A pleasure to have you here.
John, I can't tell you how excited I am. You and I were talking kind of off the grid about how, in a weird way, this for me is completely reversed because I've got a soft spot for the Premiership, and nobody seems to know what I'm talking about back here in the States. And yes, Brighton's my team, so light a candle, say a prayer. They got Man U coming up in a couple hours here. But to reverse engineer that model, my first passion, of course, is baseball, and the thought of pollinating the product, so to speak, making sure that people in Europe and in England specifically kind of get what they need, right, to feel like they're part of the zeitgeist, I would call it. Baseball is so big here; it's America's pastime, and that's the old cliche. But it can be the world's pastime too. It just takes a little bit of, actually, a lot of bit of kind of wading through some tricky waters to understand the history and the rules and who's who and what where's where and what's what. But once you get the basics down, there's nothing like it because it's an everyday reality show that plays out in real time. And to me, there's nothing like it. And I've been blessed to work for, yeah, like you said, a lot of teams. If you know Edwin Jackson and his story, the pitcher that's pitched for 14 different teams, I'm kind of the Edwin Jackson of the broadcast booth. And for the first time, really since I've been a teenager, I am a free agent. I don't have a team that I'm doing this year. I'm doing UCLA, college football and basketball. Of you might know they just had an incredible heart punch of a loss last night. So UCLA season just ended hours ago, but that's kind of what I've jumped into to pay rent and all of that. But my passion obviously is still baseball, and very very thrilled to be with you guys not only today but whenever you need me.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. I was very nearly tempted to pivot my first question away from what I was going to ask and ask you if you do want to explain, can you explain the infield fly rule to me? But I rather like not really knowing how it works. I feel like that's just
Yeah, that
it's just
era.
something I don't need to know. So my first question, before we get into asking about some of the teams that you've worked with over the last 15 or 20 years, is to ask about the difference between approaching a radio and a TV announcement, because you've done a whole load of both, and I guess that they have quite a different skill set. So, can you just tell us a little bit about how you would approach each and how they differ in terms of in-game action?
Sure. I mean, I think radio is theater of the mind. It's a complete blank canvas, and you can paint whatever you want on it. And that's why I think a lot of us in the industry prefer radio because nothing happens until we say it happens. So there's a little bit of power, I suppose, that comes with that weirdly. But there's an awesome responsibility that comes with that. People are living and dying with the outcome of these games, and it's totally up to you to paint the picture. On TV, you're just pretty much doing closed captioning, right? I mean, you can see with eyeballs what's going on. We're there to just kind of augment and we tell you something a little extra that you might already know. So, you certainly prepare for radio differently than TV because there's just so much more to get out there in radio because no one can see what's going on. But I've enjoyed both. I mean, I did the Texas Rangers television for 10 years. I did the Fox Network games concurrently with that for probably, I think, 15, 16 years. And that's fun because you get to work with some amazing people. I mean, Kirk Gibson was a partner, and Frank Robinson was a partner, and George Brett, and some of the great baseball names of all time. I got to have as my broadcast partners. And in radio, if you're a Mets fan, you'll know there's nobody better than Howie Rose. He lives and
Mm.
dies with the Mets. He's a New York native, sounds very New York, and very unapologetic about that. So it's two different mediums, but I've always enjoyed them both.
Brilliant. And let's get on to asking you about some of the teams that you've played with. So we'll start with the Rangers because you spent the bulk of your early career announcing Rangers games. And I may be being a trifle harsh here, but I said that you maybe announced that the last great Texas Rangers team, that team of sort of Michael Young and Josh Hamilton and co. How was that? How was it to sort of call a team who were really, obviously they went to the World Series in 2011. What was it like being in amongst all of that?
So, they started getting good just as I was on my way out. My last year was actually 2010, so I
Right.
missed. So they made the series in 10, but I left the organization literally, the week that the playoffs began because
Mm.
doing TV, that job stops as soon as the regular
Hmm.
season's over. The network takes over, so you're done. And it was a little bit awkward. I love my time in Texas, but Nolan Ryan, who's a complete legend, 5,714 strikeouts, no one will ever do that again. He took over the team, and we just had very different ideas about what a broadcast should sound like. Nolan's a true Texan. What he wanted was two balls, one strike, and then shut the f up. I mean, I don't need stories. I don't need to, any humor. Just give me the nuts and bolts. And for better or worse, that's just not what I do. And not to go Shakespeare on you. This is not trying to pander to the English, but to thine own self be true. I mean, you got to be who you are. And
Mm.
I found a much better fit with the Mets
Hmm.
because I think if you guys listen to Gary, Keith, and Ron, and I know a lot of you do, they got no problem quoting Seinfeld and just having some fun and telling all kinds of stories. That's what really resonates with me. So it was very bittersweet. I mean, I love the people in Texas. I love the team. You mentioned Michael Young and Josh Hamilton. I mean, it was so great to follow. The team was just getting good when I shoved off. So very bittersweet to still be living in Dallas and watching all that Rangers fever kind of coalesce and commuting all the way to New York to do a Mets team that was like 69 and 93.
Yeah.
And then the Mets did get good eventually. I mean, I got to go to a World Series with them in 2015. They had the lead in every one of those stinking games, and they lost 4 out of the 5. So not that I'm still bitter, but that kind of seems to be my thing. When I was working in the minor leagues, starting out, my very first year doing the Rochester Red Wings, it was AAA for the Orioles. They won a championship, and I figured this is easy. I'm 21 years old. I've already got a ring. This is great. I'm 50, in my 50s now, and I still don't have another ring. So the Rangers came close, the Mets came close. UCLA was in the Final Four last night and lost on a 35-footer at the Horn. I mean, I don't think I'll ever get there again. I picked Brighton as a side in the Premiership. I mean, so I'm out on championships, but the Rangers were tantalizingly close, and that was a lot of fun.
And just dwelling on the Rangers for a moment before we come on to the Mets in a second, and I do definitely want to ask you about Gary and Keith and Ron. What was it like calling a baseball team in what is notoriously the football town in the entire country? Did
Yeah,
you kind of feel like you were fighting an uphill battle?
it's a great question because they have Friday night high school football
Yeah,
in Texas. You guys have seen the movie Friday Night Lights and all
yeah.
that. That's a real thing. And I'm not kidding. Where a Rangers game on a Friday night in the Saturday morning paper would be on page 7 or 8 of the sports section. I mean, like if the Dallas Cowboys punter pulled a groin muscle, that's like all over the front page, right? But the Rangers, you'd have to have a Josh Hamilton 4 home run game to get on page one. So you're right. I mean, that was very different. But to the Rangers' credit, I mean, they started winning, and all of a sudden people started paying attention to them. And it's awkward. I'm this a little Jewish New Yorker. I'm 5'6". I wander into Texas. Everybody's wearing their, not everybody. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but I mean, there's people at the games in hats. The cowboy
Yeah.
hats and and
JR.
boots. The whole thing. That I mean, I had none of that stuff. I'm showing up in sneakers. They're wearing cowboy boots. So I always thought of the line in My Cousin Vinny, when Joe Pesci goes to Alabama, and and then they say, "Oh yeah, you blend," So it was a little bit awkward starting out, but I came to love Texas, and really really enjoyed my time there.
Excellent. So let's move over to New York, where, as you said, you may be more at home. So you're on the radio. You're on the radio with Howie, who everyone knows, absolutely iconic radio announcer. But you're head to head with what most people, I think, certainly most people I speak to over here in the UK, is the number one TV booth. How do you cope with that? I mean, do you just sort of let them run with it, or do you try and provide something different?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great question, and we're all friends. I mean, Gary and I actually, when I was in the minor leagues in Rochester, and I'm working my way up, teenager, as a part-time guy, got the full-time job when I was 21. Gary was passing through as the voice of the Pawtucket Red Sox, and you could tell was going to be a superstar. I mean, and he was so friendly to me and so kind, and we've remained great friends to this day. He really helped me. He championed my cause to get in that Mets radio booth when the job came open. So I owe him a debt of gratitude. Um, and Keith is Keith. I mean, he's so weird and so funny, and Ronnie is so smart and so good at what he does, and the three of them together are brilliant. So no, you're not going to compete with that. But to your point, there's the whole you got to be you thing. Howie and I would just kind of go off. We were 1B to their 1A, and we just would like, "Well, all right, we're just going to tell some stories and have some fun. And not everybody can be in front of a TV all the time. The New York traffic is like London traffic. There's going to be
Yeah.
people trapped in a taxi for 2 hours. And, that's the lifeline. And like I said earlier, that's why I love radio, because it's like, you feel like those people really need you. On TV, it's an embellishment. You can still enjoy a Mets game with the sound down if you're watching it. It's just better with Gary, Keith, and Ron. But you can't be in a taxi with the sound off and know what the hell is going on. So it felt more important doing radio, and Howie, of course, just such a great guy, and just a basin of knowledge about New York baseball and New York sports. So a mentor and a friend. It was just a great time.
I bet. So you mentioned Keith Hernandez, legendary weirdness. Were there any particular stories of your time working in the booth next door that stick out in terms of working with him?
Ones that I can tell and not get punished for later. He's just got such a great heart. I mean, it's so funny because Ronnie and Gary, they prepare so much. I mean, you can't outwork Gary. I mean, I would show for a 7 o'clock Mets game, I would show up at 2:30, and I'd have to walk by the TV booth to get to the radio booth, and every time, very dryly, Gary would say, "What took you so long?" I mean, like I'm just some slacker for only getting there at 2:30. I mean, Keith would show up at 6:15. I mean, so but Ronnie would be there, right around the same time, and he'd have all of his stuff spread out on a table in the food room. There was a little media eating area where we could all go into and kind of have a private moment or two or three, and he'd be in there same 2:30, 3 o'clock, working on what he wants to work on. But I think what you get with Keith is everything is just so genuine, everything's from the heart. So if something bad is happening, he's not holding back. I mean, there's a pitcher that can't find the strike zone, and you're going to hear it. He'll go, like, you got to be effing me. I mean, are you kidding me right now? And he doesn't hold anything back. He knows who he is, and he's comfortable with that. And I think that's a great life lesson, I think, for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell there's so much preparation, but it's one of life's happy accidents. That booth. It's absolutely wonderful. None of us have a rooting interest in the Mets, but we were talking about the Padres being everyone's second team. I do feel like that booth maybe makes the Mets quite a lot of people's second team
I'm
over here in
curious,
the UK.
John. Yeah, I'm curious who you guys think, because to me, I always thought the gold standard was the Mets TV booth. I think the Giants TV booth is outstanding. I think, and I've had the pleasure of working with those guys on network sometimes as well, Klug and Kite. Um, I'm so spoiled because the Texas Rangers radio booth with Eric Nadel is great. I mean, everywhere I've been. I mean, shoot, the legendary Ernie Harwell was in Detroit when I was in Detroit, and on and on and on. John Miller was a mentor when I was
Mm.
first coming up in Baltimore. He was in TV and had moved to radio and then back to TV. So I've been really, really blessed. But I'm curious as to who you guys think do it well because everybody's got their own ideas.
Well, John Miller is the first name that springs to mind. So, baseball in the UK used to be shown on network TV on Sunday nights, like
Sure.
late in the evening, and he was the voice of Sunday Night Baseball at the time. So he is kind of synonymous with baseball in this country. I think the political answer is to say that the new Chicago Cubs booth is the best one because John Shelby is a good friend of our podcast. So,
Right.
but in Lancaster, taking over from
Those
Lancaster, can
guys
they
are,
actually make this better?
well,
Maybe,
I
yeah,
tell
they
you,
can.
Chicago's a powerhouse between
Jason Betty as well,
and
yeah, so
Boom
good.
and Casper. I mean, and Pat Hughes. I mean, to me, it's the epicenter now is Chicago. With
Yeah,
all due respect to all my buddies in New York, but yeah, it's funny. Those guys are all a little bit younger than me, not much, but I'm early 50s. Those guys are kind of mid 40s, I think, and they are the standard bearers now. I don't think anybody will ever be better all around than John Miller, and I say that with all due respect to Vin Scully, who did it for 62 years at the highest possible level. But between the voice, the knowledge, the passion, the humor, I don't think anybody's ever done it better than John.
yeah, he was absolutely incredible, and I'm so pleased to hear you say that as well. It's not just a sort of nostalgic hark back to the times when I was watching it at 11:30, as 1:30 in the morning on a Sunday,
Right.
half cut after a night on the tiles as a tearaway student. Uh, so I want to ask another question about the Mets. So you said already you were there for that incredible World Series run, and quite possibly one of the most impressive and unbelievable pitching rotations ever seen in modern baseball. How was it to sit in the booth every night and watch Harvey and DeGrom and Syndergaard just tear people to pieces?
Yeah, and the fact that they were mostly homegrown and they were that young and just kind of coming into their own, I've never seen anything like it. And I know the Dodgers have put together an incredible rotation now, and the Padres for that measure have done so too. But there was nothing like a weekend where Matt Harvey was on the mound that year. It all started on a night against the Nationals when he was matched up against Strasburg, when this organic chant about Harvey's better started up, and there were only about 18,000 people there that night. And I remember turning to Howie and saying, "This is the last time we are ever going to see a crowd this small with Matt Harvey on the mound." And his flame burned out. It's great to see him back with the Orioles now and actually
He
pitch
looked
well.
good yesterday. I'm a
Yeah,
Red Sox
he was,
fan. I was
he was
not enjoying
amazing.
how good he looked.
But what an interesting group of guys. Syndergaard. When I was doing a podcast for the Mets, we did this thing called Readers Theater, where during off days we'd like go and get the best lines from Step Brothers or some other goofy movie. And I'd have Noah do some lines and I do some. I mean, he was just so playful and so great to do that stuff with. Yeah, the Mets of 2015 were really special. Cespedes showed up and just put on a show, and he was the most curious, almost this uh, made up character. You didn't get to know him because he didn't really speak English. He'd go off in the back of the dugout and smoke a cigarette, and then come up and hit some 450-foot home run. Just this, mysterious, mystical, bizarre character. Like, where did he come from, and what is this? And they won games in impossible ways, and all the way up until that World Series when it was just the Royals' time, I guess, and Familia was unable to get people out. Unfortunately, that was some kind of year.
And Jacob deGrom, obviously we talked a bit about Harvey, and genuinely I'm pleased to see him looking genuinely good yesterday, albeit against my team. Syndergaard is hopefully going to be back by mid-season, but deGrom, I mean, this guy's one of the greatest pitchers of all time, isn't he?
Yeah, and when he came up, I tell this story all the time that he came up with a guy who was supposed to be awesome, a guy named Rafael Montero. They got called up the
Yeah,
exact same day, and the big headlines in the New York Post was all about Montero's up, and all the way like in paragraph 11 of the story. And the Mets also brought up this kid Jacob deGrom, and from he was throwing 94, and that gets your attention. But then he's throwing 95, and then he's throwing 96, and then last year he's throwing 100, and you're just like, wait a minute, how do you get older and throw harder? And all of a sudden, this slider's at 93, 94. That's we used to rave about Syndergaard's being at 89. Like, whoa, we've never seen that. Now this guy's got one at 93. So um, guy was a shortstop in college. Was not supposed to be anything. He was a ninth round draft pick. There were 129 pitchers that were selected before him in the draft that year. Just a remarkable story.
Yeah, it really is. So you were with the Mets for a good long time, and then you transitioned over to Fenway Park to call on WEI in 2019. So again, I want to ask about some of the characters, but first of all, I want to ask about just calling in Fenway. I mean, that must just be, like going to church and saying your prayers.
Yeah, it's a bucket list thing. It is. I mean, I was never a Red Sox fan, but if you have a chance to be doing games for the Red Sox and hang out at Fenway, you're not going to say no to that. And it was a weird circumstance. I left the Mets thinking I had a job lined up in San Diego where I live. I just was kind of tired of the East Coast West Coast ping pong. It's a 3,000-mile commute, and it just after a few years it got a little much. So it looked like there was something opening in San Diego. It ended up not opening, and I kind of got caught. Um, so the Red Sox had an opening for just 50 games, and I said, absolutely. If you guys want me for 50, that's perfect. And it was great. Joe Castiglione, one of the nicest human beings you're going to meet, a radio legend there. The Rem Dog in the TV booth. Everything you hear about those guys is true. They're super sweet, super nice. Red Sox fans are a different breed, to be sure. This was the Lewin magic, where the Red Sox have just won a World Series. I show up and it all goes to shit. So, in fact, I started on their opening road trip that year, did the first 10 games, 11 games, and they started out 2-8, and then won a 1-0 game at Arizona to limp home 3-8. And, I'm the new guy. And the same thing had happened to me with the Cubs. The one year I did the Cubs was the one year they got out 0-14, so it's just like, guys, I'm so sorry. But no, nothing bad to say about Boston. It's a top flight organization, of course, and you all know with the Liverpool connection. I mean, they'll spend money and they'll win.
Yeah, they absolutely will. I wanted to ask you about Joe Castiglione. Like one of the weirdest experiences of my life was, we were fortunate enough to have press access at the London series a couple of years ago, and we felt like complete imposters when we were in the press room. But it was even more so when I was stood with my back to him, and I could hear Joe Castiglione behind me, having heard him for so many years as a Red Sox fan on the radio, and he sounds literally the same. It's not a radio voice. So I was like, oh my goodness me. I turned around and there he is. But he must have been like, he talked about some of these guys. He must have been incredible to sort of share a booth and share time with.
Yeah, I mean, and I say this fondly, he's Grandpa Joe.
Yeah.
There's a little bit to him where he can be be forgetful sometimes. He's got some quirks, whatever you want to say. He is the warmest, nicest man in baseball. I mean, just so genuinely happy for you if something nice happens to you, um, and really good at what he does. He doesn't have the classic baseball voice, of course, but he's got just so much passion for what he does, and the kind of guy that if you tell him one time that your daughter is going off and doing something, and he'll ask you 15 times, so how'd that go for Kelsey? I mean, just a charming man.
Yeah, and indeed, you mentioned the Rem Dog. That's, I mean, of course, I'm biased. It's my booth, but that particularly the 3-man booth when they've got old Shticky himself, the Red Sox own version of Keith Hernandez, Mr. High Cheese Dennis Eckersley.
That's the best. Yeah, and it's funny because I've worked with both Eck and Kirk Gibson, which is kind of unusual, since they're famous for matching up in the World Series.
Yeah.
And Eck's another one of those guys who I think all the guys we're connecting with here as we talk, it's those that are genuine. They'll give you exactly who they are. There's no false fronts like that. You're just very unvarnished. And like you say, not the King's English with Eck, but you learn something every time.
You certainly do. I don't know if Russ or Ben who are with us here have got any questions before we let Josh go.
I had a couple of quick questions about the process process basically on radio and TV of preparing for a broadcast? And first of all, so you mentioned earlier, I don't know if you were live at that point or not, that you kind of the Edwin Jackson of broadcast booths, moved around a lot. How did it work in terms of relationships, getting to a new city, having to try to get to know everyone, and then also how do those relationships develop the longer you stay in a city, people start to recognize rather than you recognizing them?
That's a great question. And the legendary Jack Buck, longtime voice of the Cardinals, used to say that the secret of success in this business is just stay somewhere long enough where people forget that they hate you. And um, unfortunately, I have bounced around a lot, and that really wasn't by design, except at first. I mean, I had my year with the Cubs, and uh, you know, Harry Carey wanted Chip Carey there, his grandson, and I recognized that, and think Harry's wonderful, and I didn't want to be in the way. So when the Tigers said, "Hey, if you want to jump over here," I was kind of like, "Look, I don't want to be in any weird family business, with the Carries. I mean, I love the Cubs; it's a great job, but I'll go to Detroit and do that." Um, my wife at the time, we're not married anymore. When we got to Detroit, just didn't love Detroit. She's a native Texan, and when the Rangers called, she's like, "Can we please go there?" I got family, and we're raising kids now, and I'm like, "All right, I really love my Tigers job." It's like, "All right, I mean, the Rangers are gonna pay me. That's fine. We'll do that." And I think I could have stayed in Texas for a very long time because they, great people, like I said. And to your point, Ben, it's not easy, especially when you're a stranger in a strange land. When you're a New Yorker in Texas, that's weird. So it took a little while to break through, but once I did, I really, really enjoyed it. Uh, but like I said earlier, when Nolan Ryan came along and he had his own ideas about what the broadcast should sound like, it was just time to move on, and that's really what started the vagabond thing. When I got to
Sure.
New York, suddenly the geography became too weird. So go to San Diego so I can stay home, but then there's no job there, so then I got to go back to Boston. So yeah, it was never by design to bounce around like that. But it has afforded me. I've come to look at it as a real blessing. It's afforded me to work with all these amazing people, meet amazing people, figure out all these new cities, and it's I've got so much respect for the Ernie Harwells, for example, that just went to Detroit and stayed in Detroit. Vince Scully in LA once the Dodgers left Brooklyn. That's great.
Mm.
But not everybody has that happen. And, I look at it as a positive that I got to work for 6 teams and I got to make friends in every one of them, every
Yeah,
town.
I mean, from the outside looking in, I got to say I'm quite jealous of the journey you've done. That sounds amazing. Um, the one thing that always blows me away with broadcasts on TV, but especially on radio, is the amount of airtime you just have to fill. Like baseball games are long, and there's a lot of times when nothing's going on. And I always find it amazing that guys have stuff to say, and it's not just dead air for hour after hour. How do you prepare for a broadcast knowing that there's going to be a lot of time to fill, whether it be with chatter about the weather, whether it be with stories about the team? How do you prepare for a broadcast knowing that there's 9 innings, three and a half, 4 hours worth to fill with interesting information?
That's a really great question, and I'm not sure I can do a screen share because I'm a bit of an idiot. I probably can't, but I actually have pulled up right now. Can I share this? I have no idea. I'll try. I have started something when I was in my 20s, just collecting basically every story, everything of interest that I could find. Some of it's on your own research. You'll go down and talk to guys. There's no substitute for just talking to people straight up. And that's what COVID has been such a killer about. You can't get close to the players or the coaches or anybody anymore, even the opposing broadcasters. There used to be such a joy in just collecting information, like you'd collect panini stickers for something back in the day. And I'll try to share this here.
He should be able to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's coming through or not. Let me hit that a couple of times.
Yep.
No, I
Oh
hit
yeah.
that. Can you see some text on there?
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, so I call my collection Otis, which is an acronym for Obscure Trivia Information and Shit. And before it was so easy on a computer to just pull stuff up, I literally would carry a binder uh, named Otis around. So any note, if we want to talk about hitting streaks, for example, that's what's pulled up right now. hitting unselfishly as a topic. Most hits in one game. I mean, just the H's.
Wow.
You know, this is about a 400-page document that
Wow.
has just been, culled from over the years. And each team has a folder where, obviously on the Mets, I've got probably 120 pages on the Mets. On the Pirates, I've probably got, 18 pages. But now that you can cut, paste, and copy, on a computer, if a Pirates guy gets traded to the Tigers, you just click, move, and all your stuff on that guy is now in this file. So I always have that stuff handy. You'd like to think that you have everything memorized and it's on the tip of your tongue, but unless you're Bob Costas or a genius, my mind doesn't work like that. So I always have kind of a cheat sheet nearby. So I try to talk extemporaneously, try to do things off the top of my head. But if for some reason Howie Rose is off on a topic, hey, this guy's got an 11-game hitting streak, I'll pull up, the 30 little nuggets I've accumulated about interesting things about hitting streaks, and I'll just kind of scan it. And if I got something to add to his conversation, then there it is. On a day-by-day basis, we get inundated with statistics and information, and especially in New York, there's all these different newspapers and blogs, so you can drive yourself bananas, trying to keep up with everything. I mean, just on blogs alone, and now obviously with Twitter and everything else. I mean, somebody out there always has something else that's interesting that you don't have, and it is kind of an arms race where it used to be when I first got in the business, and I don't mean to sound like grandpa here, but the joy for me, the fun of the research and development was I want to go find out something that nobody knows yet. So sometimes it's going to the library. Remember libraries? Where you like literally go and look in an old book and find an old story about Fenway Park, so that when you're doing a game, Rangers at Red Sox, here's a little interesting nugget about Fenway Park that even I didn't know until today. Go down on the field and talk to a couple of the Red Sox coaches and players and find out something that no one else has. Well, now everybody, information is shared so quickly and easily. So it's no longer proprietary, and that's fine. I don't have that much of an ego. It's like we can all share in this, and that's cool. But I think the problem now is there are so many experts out there, and everybody knows so much that if you fuck something up, they'll kill you for it. It used to be you could say, well, this guy back in 1989, blah blah blah, and now there's 100 people that will say 1988, you idiot. And so that's the challenge. That's actually to me made it a little less fun. But the joy of research and the joy of telling stories. Baseball is such a storyteller's medium, and especially on the radio. And I think that's why I personally gravitated to it.
Right, I think that's sorry, Russell. You're gonna if you have any questions. I'm conscious it's now 18:09 and first pitch is in a moment. So we'll finish there. Thank you so much for your time, Josh. We're gonna put the link up for our Zoom room so anyone can join us in here in a moment, and I think Josh is gonna stick around for a little while before he has to hop off back to San Diego, hopefully. And remember, if you're looking for an interesting and different way to watch your baseball this evening, then MLB UK Communities in Play runs will be on YouTube. I think they'll have started about 10 minutes ago, so go and check that out. Josh, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll have to get you back for a full podcast
anytime. I'm so passionate about what you guys are talking about. So yeah, anytime you need me, just whistle.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. I'll get my question anyway.
Yeah, you will, of course. Of course you will. It's just not live. It may still be live. Darius hasn't put his thumb down yet.
No, all I was going to ask about is the thing that's been interesting to me, like this offseason, is Sportsnet and Toronto have said that like they're not doing a dedicated radio broadcast anymore.
Oh, that would have been a great one to do live. Sorry, Ross.